Hey, why do you have the latest game console? Oh, Max wanted it, so I bought it. What? Why do you have so much money? I withdrew it from our joint account. Huh? Why did you do that? It's fine. It's marital property after all. My husband has been distributing the inheritance in each case. But honestly, it's not that much. Therefore, if my husband continues to spend money as he currently does, the funds will eventually run out. Since our son also intends to go to college in the future, tuition will be needed as well. In such a situation, I am seriously concerned about whether we can make a living in the future. My name is Nicole. I am a 43-year-old office worker. I have been married to Sean for almost 15 years now. Our son, Max, is currently 17 years old and attends high school. In fact, our son is my husband's child from a previous relationship. My husband had a previous spouse who disappeared right after giving birth. After his ex-wife disappeared, he took care of his son alone with support from his parents. Then one day, a completed divorce application arrived and he had no choice but to divorce. After some time, we started dating and eventually got married. At the time, our son was 2 years old and recognized me as his real mother. There was deep affection between Sean and me, and our son also felt close to me. So we decided to marry early and build a family. Thus, we became a couple. Despite what happened with the ex-wife, his parents warmly welcomed me. Nicole seems trustworthy. Unlike the previous wife, she doesn't have instability. Honestly, I wasn't too surprised when she suddenly disappeared. My mother-in-law said this calmly, and I admired her mental strength. With the support of my in-laws, I felt that the first experience of parenting would go smoothly. Since our son is also fond of his grandmother, she could offer advice if needed. Thus, our married life began. Our son was adorable, and our newlywed life with my husband was fun. The initial phase of marriage was truly happy. Our son grew up healthy, and the relationship within the family was good. Every day was enjoyable. When busy with work, my mother-in-law came to help, and the family supported each other through various challenges. I believed our happy days would continue indefinitely, but unexpected events happened suddenly. What? You were laid off? This happened about 10 years after we got married. Due to the economic downturn and worsening management, the company my husband worked for implemented a massive layoff, and unfortunately, my husband was one of them. Damn it. Why was I laid off? For my husband, the news of being laid off was a huge shock as he had not anticipated it. Did you ask your boss to reconsider? Of course, I tried. I also asked for the reason. They said it would be okay because my wife earns well. They told me there's no problem with our income because you work for a big company. Oh, apparently, my high income was the reason my husband was put on the layoff list. Knowing this fact, I was engulfed in complex emotions. I felt guilty, but I had worked hard in job hunting, joined my current company, and worked as an employee to increase my salary. Currently, I hold a managerial position, have subordinates, and am working as hard as I can. It's hard to accept that my efforts are seen in a negative light. But you know, if the management is bad, the company might eventually go bankrupt. It's a chance to change jobs earlier. Let's think positively. That's true. Although my husband's expression was gloomy, he tried to change his mood with my encouragement. However, when nothing seems to go right, nothing progresses as hoped. He seems to be struggling to find a new job. Even when trying to find a workplace that offers a salary equivalent to his previous one, he's not successful. When I suggested, how about considering a lower salary level? He exploded in anger, asking, "Are you mocking me? I don't mean it that way, but it's going to be tough if you can't find a job. Seeing my husband suffer like this is unbearable for me. That's why I hoped he would decide to re-employ even if it meant accepting a lower salary and start working actively again." After many discussions, I encouraged him to take interviews at various companies. However, that attempt also failed. Even when considering lower salary levels, he wasn't hired. Gradually, my husband's mood became more volatile. "You're the one who said to think about lowering the salary, and yet, it's completely useless. Are you trying to embarrass me? He yelled at me, overwhelmed by anger. Facing such unjust anger, I too was at a loss. However, my husband had no one but me to direct his powerless anger at. Therefore, he decided to give up on regular employment and instead started working part-time. For me, having even a little income is far better than clashing with my stressed husband. But unfortunately, misfortunes seemed to follow one after another. It was sudden, but my father-in-law passed away due to illness, leaving us speechless. The suddenness of it meant neither my husband nor I could catch up with our emotions. When we rushed to the hospital, my father-in-law had already passed away and was lying on a bed covered with a white cloth. Dad, why? We always appreciated my father-in-law's kindness, and his death brought deep sadness. An emotional outburst at the funeral was inevitable, and we shed tears. Mother, are you okay? Yes, I'm sorry to worry you. I never thought my husband would pass away first. He always said he didn't want to be left behind. He promised me, don't worry, I'll see you off. And yet, he broke that promise. My mother-in-law was deeply disappointed at losing her beloved husband. Our 12-year-old son understood the concept of death and mourned his grandfather deeply. Since then, I began visiting my mother-in-law regularly. I did so because I didn't want her to feel the loneliness that often comes with living alone. Nicole, thank you always. But aren't you pushing yourself too hard? You seem pale. No, it's nothing. I'm just a bit busy with work. I replied to my mother-in-law's concern like that. But in reality, I felt a significant burden. My husband, while only working as a part-timer 2 or 3 days a week, didn't help with household chores at all. As a result, I had to take on all household duties in between my busy work schedule, sometimes even while working overtime. My growing son had a hearty appetite, necessitating the preparation of a substantial amount of food. I'm hungry. Is dinner not ready yet? Unaware of how much I was struggling, our son made self-centered demands. I'm preparing it now. Please wait a bit. What? That's useless. Don't talk to your mom like that. Be quiet. If you don't want to be complained at, do your chores properly. Our son was entering his rebellious phase and started to behave rudely towards me. I was already mentally and physically exhausted, and facing such issues only added to the hardship. Hey, can you say something? Max's behavior has been too much lately. When I brought up the issue, my husband reluctantly responded, "It's natural for a son to act that way towards his mother. He'll change his attitude as he grows up." Still, since my husband didn't support me, our son thought he could get away with anything. "Can you increase my allowance, Mom?" "It's not possible. The amount we're giving now is enough. You'll have to manage with that." "What?" "Our life is supported by Dad." That is, while I was at a loss for words, my husband was watching me from afar. Actually, my husband had asked me to hide the fact that he was employed on a non-regular basis from our son. He wanted to maintain his pride as a father. It seemed trivial to me, but I felt it was important to him. However, seeing our son say such things, I realized that this fact was indeed affecting him. Even the income from Mom's part-time job isn't much different from mine. If I start working part-time in high school, I could earn as much as Mom does. Our son declared this and wouldn't listen to anything I said. As a result, my stress increased day by day, and it began to show in my physique. Since I needed to prepare meals for our son and husband first, I ended up eating my portion after they had finished. Consequently, eating late and the stress made it easier for me to gain weight. Gradually, I gained about 22 pounds in half a year. Although I wouldn't be considered obese, I had clearly become rounder. Our son and husband started to mock me, comparing me to a pig and laughing. "Mom, you clearly can't manage yourself. Don't come to the school open day. It's embarrassing." Our son, now in middle school, became even more disrespectful, and it seemed my husband was encouraging that attitude. "Hey, why did you buy a new game console?" "Max wanted it, so I bought it." "Wait, how did you afford that?" "I used our joint account." "Huh? Why would you do that without asking?" "It's fine. It's our shared funds. I'm just trying to maintain a good relationship with our son as a father." How does giving things build a good relationship? Quiet down. Enjoying games together is a form of interaction. Don't get mad over trivial things. If you're concerned, you should worry about your own figure. My husband snapped back with those words. After that, no matter what our son requested, my husband continued to provide it instantly. Our son stopped asking me for things and only asked my husband. My husband happily fulfilled our son's requests, giving him anything, but the money used came from our shared savings. There was a time when my husband contributed a bit to the savings, but the funds were depleting at a fast pace, and soon my contributions might also be exhausted. When our son entered high school, my husband started buying him expensive wallets and brand-name clothes, probably to maintain a facade for our son, providing valuable items so our son wouldn't realize that his father was a non-regular employee. However, my husband's contributions to our shared savings almost ceased, and in reality, I was covering all living expenses. My husband seemed indifferent to this fact, covering gifts for our son from the shared savings, while his allowance came from his part-time income. My husband seemed to be self-sufficient in managing money, showing no intention of contributing to the household. My father-in-law passed away a few years ago, and last year, my mother-in-law also left this world. Although their inheritance was divided, it wasn't much in reality. If my husband continues spending at this rate, our funds will eventually run out, sooner or later. Our son also wishes to go to college, which will require tuition fees. Facing such financial conditions, I felt a deep anxiety about how we would manage in the future. At that time, our son wanted an expensive watch for his birthday, costing several $1,000s. Clearly, a high school student doesn't need such an expensive item. Yet, my husband said, "That's great. Then, how about Dad buys one too and we both wear the same brand?" I couldn't stand it anymore and spoke out strongly. Look at reality. A high school student doesn't need such expensive items, and you need to start saving. We can't afford to make such purchases. When I got angry, my husband was shocked and became furious. "What did you say? You're just a wife. Don't get cocky." Our son agreed with my husband's opinion, saying, "That's right. You're just a pet pig." As our son began to mock me, my husband joined in, laughing. "You look just like an unsightly pig." "Hey Dad, what should we do with such a pig? She doesn't earn much anyway. Indeed, we should kick out a pig that brings in little income from the house." This is how my husband and son insulted me. I had reached my breaking point. Why should I endure such treatment? I decided to leave the house with my belongings. The rest is up to them. They won't manage well without me. As I was packing, my husband and son mocked me, saying, "Good riddance to the noisy one." I didn't argue back, just silently packed my things and left the house. For the night, I stayed at a hotel and withdrew my share of the money from the bank the next morning. It was the money I had contributed to our joint account over the years. A week later, I received an angry call from my husband. I was busy, but I didn't want it to affect my work, so I reluctantly answered. "Hey, why did you withdraw money from the account? Return the money, thief." My husband was screaming, but that money was all earned by me. "It seems you're mistaken, but the funds in the joint account are not solely yours. I have been contributing my earnings every month. I withdrew my share because I didn't want it to be spent without my consent. So, the remaining amount is equivalent to what you have contributed. If nothing is left, it means you have spent all of your savings. That is, Nicole, come back." Upon hearing those words, I ended the call. Then, I immediately blocked his number. They should learn the hard way what it's like without me. For a year, I didn't return home. During that time, my husband and son contacted me numerous times. Months passed, and it seemed that my husband's part-time income was not enough to sustain their lives. Realizing their dire situation, our son demanded the truth from my husband. Eventually, my husband confessed, and since then, they had been struggling to bring me back home. I rented an apartment close to my workplace and focused on my job. As a result, I was able to lead a significant project to success. A year passed quickly as I concentrated on my work, and feeling it was time to settle things with my husband and son, I agreed to meet them. It was the moment for a final decision regarding our past relationship. When we finally met, the condition of my husband and son was pitiful. They appeared before me in a deteriorated state, their clothes ragged, hair unkempt, and it was clear they were not leading a healthy lifestyle. Since the last time I saw them, they had lost a noticeable amount of weight in a state that couldn't be considered healthy. During this time, I managed to regain my health due to the change in my living situation, losing about 22 pounds in a year and returning to my slim figure. Without making significant changes to my diet, merely putting mental distance between myself and my husband and son greatly reduced my stress. Additionally, incorporating moderate exercise into my lifestyle contributed significantly to my weight loss. My husband earnestly pleaded for me to return, but his plea did not move my heart. "Please, come back." As he begged on his knees, I responded calmly. "Such worthless pleading? What could it possibly mean? It's useless to do such a thing. I came here today to formally request a divorce," I stated clearly. At that moment, it seemed as if the color drained from the faces of my husband and son. "Wait. If we get divorced, we'll truly be left with nowhere to go," my husband pleaded desperately. Our son also said, "Yeah, I've already sold all my branded stuff for lunch money. I can't stand this poverty any longer," appealing to the severity of our current situation. However, I had already made my decision and was ready to start a new life away from my husband and son. "I have no obligation to you. You ignored me and treated me like a servant. I'm fed up with both of you. I've decided to eliminate you from my life, so I'm cutting ties completely." Our son suddenly seemed to realize something and argued back. "Then, you should pay child support. If you're divorcing Dad, you should be the one to pay." My husband agreed with our son, intensifying their demand. "That's right. Since you're the one earning, you should pay child support. Then we can agree to the divorce." They seemed to think they had played a clever hand. However, my husband and son were overlooking a crucial fact. "Actually, I'm not obligated to pay you any child support." "What? Max, you're not biologically related to me." Our son looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "Max, you are a child of his previous wife. Shortly after you were born, your biological mother disappeared and you were raised by your grandparents. I married your father when you were 2 years old. So, we have no blood relation, and I have no obligation to pay child support after the divorce." "I see. Despite that, I have loved and cared for you as my own child, but I can't take it anymore. I'm ending my marriage with this man, severing ties with you, and we're going back to being complete strangers." My declaration seemed to shock our son and husband, leaving them visibly pale. "I want you to sign the divorce papers immediately, but if that's difficult, I'll have to hire a lawyer and possibly take this to court." "Court? We can't afford that." "Then sign the divorce papers." My husband reluctantly signed the divorce papers. Afterward, I submitted the divorce documents to the city hall, and the divorce from my husband was officially finalized. My ex-husband is now juggling multiple part-time jobs, exhaustively supporting both his son's education and their livelihood. However, due to the shock of the truth about his lies and the fact that I wasn't their biological mother, our son harbors strong resentment towards him, and their relationship has significantly deteriorated. I still receive messages from them asking for help, but I ignore them. I hope our son takes this opportunity to reflect on himself and improve his character. As for my ex-husband, even if he suffers from the consequences of his actions, I feel nothing. With these thoughts, I continue to immerse myself in my work today. For the foreseeable future, I plan to focus more on achieving results at work than on love or marriage. My name is Dorothy. I am 68 years old this year. At the end of last year, my husband, with whom I lived, suddenly passed away from cancer, and I had to move in with my eldest son, John, on short notice. Originally, my husband and I lived in the house where John and his family now reside. However, when John started his own family and had a child, we moved to a small one-room apartment nearby and gave them the house. We tried to be considerate in our own way. John runs his own business and couldn't get a mortgage due to his unstable income, so my husband decided to give them the house, thinking about the future of our grandchildren. When we handed over the house, we renovated the interior to make it as good as new. John was blessed with 3 children afterward, and we maintained a good relationship, playing with our grandchildren occasionally, and dining together at a nearby restaurant on birthdays. But when my husband was diagnosed with cancer and it was too late for treatment, he contacted John, concerned about my future, and said, "After I'm gone, please take care of Mother. Live with her." My husband asked John to live with me. I told my husband not to worry as I was still healthy and could live alone, but he wouldn't accept it. He was worried about leaving me alone. John respected his father's last wish and accepted living with me. In fact, since we gave the house to John, I had never set foot in it. Thinking that John's wife, Cindy, might mind, I refrained from visiting their house. Therefore, I encountered an unexpected sight when I arrived at the house. To avoid being a burden, I moved to John's house with minimal luggage. The house was originally a modest 4-room house with 3 rooms upstairs and 1 downstairs. John came out of the house and said, "Was today the moving day?" He seemed surprised. He's always been forgetful, and that hasn't changed even as an adult. As I entered the house, I saw a mountain of shoes and a strange smell wafting from inside. The exterior looked normal, so I was shocked. John seemed unconcerned and muttered, "Dad said so, so I accepted it. But honestly, there's no place for you to live here, Mom," as he walked inside. Reluctantly, I took off my shoes and entered the house, where I found the room on the first floor overflowing with items. The living and dining rooms I was shown were also glittered with shopping bags and trash, leaving no place to stand. It was like the trash houses I had seen on TV, and I was astonished. Despite its clean exterior, the inside was like a different world in its filthiness. When Cindy, John's wife, noticed my arrival, she got up from the sofa. "Mother, since there's no place to lay out a mattress, please find somewhere appropriate. I'm too tired from work to prepare anything," she said before lying down again. She runs a beauty salon and, according to John, makes a substantial income. As I looked at John, he said, "I'm tired from work too. Why don't you organize the room yourself and make some space?" And then he went upstairs. With no choice, I moved the items from the room to the hallway, only for Cindy to yell, "Hey, don't put things in the hallway, they're in the way." I quickly apologized and arranged them, to which she said, "It's fine to tidy up, but don't throw anything away without asking," and returned to the living room. I managed to clear a small space. I was utterly exhausted from tidying up the heavily cluttered room. Then Cindy said, "Mother, can't you at least help with preparing the meal? I'm not your maid." I responded, "Oh, it's already time for dinner, isn't it?" I got carried away with cleaning and lost track of time, and hurried to the kitchen. I was so engrossed in tidying up the room that I lost track of time. The kitchen was littered with food waste, but Cindy was busily frying a large amount of meat. When I asked if there was anything I could help with, she pointed to the dishes and said, "Can you do the washing up?" She then added in a low voice, "I was hoping that you'd consider ordering pizza or something since you suddenly came to stay with us." Pondering over her words and my own sense of propriety, I decided not to argue and replied with a smile, "Sorry about that. I was a bit busy today, but how about we order pizza tomorrow?" Cindy's mood improved and she smiled. "That sounds good. Let's do that tomorrow." I reminded myself that the mess in the house was understandable given they had 3 children, and Cindy herself worked as a beautician and manager. I realized I needed to change my mindset to adapt to living there. That evening's dinner was just a lot of grilled meat and potatoes, with no other vegetables or soup prepared. Surprisingly, despite living in a dirty house, Cindy was very particular about clothing. She would always wash clothes and towels after just one use and strictly instructed her children not to get dirty. As a result, the whole family always looked presentable when going out. and they never realized the state of the house until now. From the next day, I devoted myself to cleaning. I neatly arranged items that were unclear whether they were trash or not, and sought confirmation from Cindy when she returned from work. Due to the large amount of trash, she eventually started to respond with a disinterested, "It's okay, just throw it away," when I asked for confirmation daily. I hesitated to touch other people's things, but it was hard to see the house I once lived in so dirty and with no walking space. After a month, the trash was finally cleared and the house became orderly. With walking space now available, the house looked significantly cleaner. The grandchildren were delighted, playing on the carpet and saying, "It's like the house we see on TV." Their habit of throwing half-eaten snacks on the floor also disappeared. Though John and Cindy never thanked me, I didn't mind as I did it willingly. But I didn't know that my cleaning was actually being seen as a nuisance. Far from being grateful, Cindy felt offended by my actions, saying, "What's this, sarcasm? A mother-in-law's check." No one complained or asked for it. I accidentally overheard this during a late-night trip to the bathroom while John and Cindy were having a drink. John said, "If it weren't for Dad's words, we wouldn't have taken her in, who lives on a pension." His words were in full support of Cindy. Hearing this directly made me very sad. Wondering if there was something wrong with the way I raised him, I returned to my room unnoticed. I felt pathetic sleeping in a dark, small space surrounded by my belongings. However, thinking of my grandchildren who grew up in an unclean environment, I convinced myself that my actions were right and fell asleep. After that, whenever I cleaned, Cindy would quietly leave somewhere. Unable to bear always having meat and potatoes for meals, I proposed to Cindy, "Would it be okay if I made a stew next time? Considering my age, I need vegetables." She hysterically placed the dishes down and coldly replied, "Do as you like, but arrange the ingredients yourself." It seemed I had angered her. From then on, she left all cooking to me and stopped entering the kitchen. The grandchildren, likely deficient in vitamins, ate vegetables and fruits, saying, "It's so delicious." They started to become affectionate, asking, "Grandma, put a fried egg on the curry?" "Me too, me too." One night, when Cindy was late due to a drinking party, the grandchildren came to my mattress and slept with me. Since then, even when their parents were home, they started sleeping with me. This probably irritated Cindy even more. Having the children become attached to their grandmother might not have been pleasant for her. Eventually, I ended up preparing all the meals. About half a year after that, the summer holidays began, and the family started planning a vacation. Without saying anything to me, John and Cindy, along with the children, were looking at brochures and searching online. It was clear from their behavior and attitude that they had no intention of taking me with them. Honestly, even if they did, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I decided to enjoy my role in taking care of the house in their absence. However, my eldest grandchild suddenly asked, "Grandma is coming too, right?" The expressions of John and Cindy were complicated, but as the grandchild insisted on my joining, it was decided that I would go along. Cindy, seemingly displeased, said, "Since we'll go early, please prepare everyone's breakfast and do the laundry. It's only natural since we're taking you." Therefore, I woke up at 4 a.m. to prepare the meals and do the laundry. On the car journey, I needed frequent bathroom breaks due to my age, and whenever we entered the highway, I had to ask, "Sorry, could we stop for a break?" Several times. John and Cindy, eager to reach the destination, could barely hide their irritation at the crowded rest stops. The grandchild who wanted me to come also became impatient, saying, "Let's go quickly." John scolded, "It's your fault," which startled the grandchild into crying loudly. With the added traffic congestion, the mood in the car worsened, and Cindy kept complaining, "We spent so much money for this, and it's terrible." It was hard enough for me to get a break. Upon reaching the amusement park, I said, "I'll wait at the cafe while everyone enjoys themselves," and distanced myself. After the children regained their spirits and ran off to the playgrounds, Cindy returned and said, "Please pay for your own expenses," adding another layer of discomfort. With no facilities for the elderly at the amusement park and the cafe getting crowded, I decided to sit on a bench outside. I had taken precautions against the sun, but the summer heat was intense, and the next thing I knew, I was in the amusement park's medical room. I overheard a doctor-like person scolding John and Cindy, saying, "How could you neglect an elderly person like this?" It seemed I had a mild heat stroke. The early morning lunch preparation, laundry, and long car ride seemed to have affected my poor health. John and Cindy, looking annoyed, took me back to the hotel. After checking in, they led me to my room, saying, "Please don't cause any more trouble, and we really shouldn't have brought you. We're going out for the night, so eat something before leaving for the amusement park again." Feeling dizzy, I laid myself down. Alone in the quiet hotel, I began to question what I was doing. Usually, I was busy caring for my grandchildren and doing housework without much time to think. The vacation planning lacked consideration for me, and no one cared that I fell ill after being overwhelmed with early morning tasks. I was lying down there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was right. I thought that if I were to collapse in the future, they would probably neglect me just as they had now. Even though I did housework, I was treated as a nuisance. As a mother who had given birth to a son, I realized that I had been harboring expectations, but that was a mistake. I fell asleep pondering whether I should make a decision. Later on, around 6 p.m., I heard my grandchildren's voices asking, "Grandma, are you okay?" They seemed to have returned early from the amusement park because they were worried about me. John and Cindy were whispering in the background, sounding displeased. Cindy then said, "Kids, go outside. I'll talk to her and let the children go out to the hotel's playground." Then Cindy began, "Mother, please stop. Don't you think it's extravagant for an elderly person to travel? Shouldn't someone living on a pension stay home and clean? You're good at cleaning, right?" she said accusingly. The trip was planned for 2 nights and 3 days, and we were supposed to go back to the amusement park the next day. The final day was scheduled for a trick art exhibition and a museum tour, which I thought I could participate in. However, when I asked, "Do I have to leave right now?" John replied irritably, "What else is there?" He vented, "What am I supposed to do now? The plans are ruined. Honestly, I only took you in because of Dad's will, but I can't stand the idea of you having fun for free." Those words solidified the vague decision I had in my mind. I realized I should sever ties with them. I stood up and said I understand, gathered my belongings, went to the front desk, and asked for a taxi. When my grandchildren noticed me, I thought of it as a final farewell and said, "Grandma isn't feeling well, so I'm going home early. You guys have fun," and patted their heads. They seemed to sense something was wrong but couldn't articulate it and just said, "Get well soon," with a smile. I got into the taxi, gave the driver my home address, and he expressed concern about the long-distance fare. I showed him my platinum card and said, "I'll pay with this." He thanked me and started driving quietly to avoid making me feel sick. Upon arriving home, I immediately began cleaning. This time, the cleaning seemed to be quite extensive. The condominium I used to live in was up for rent, but fortunately, no tenant had been found yet, so I was able to return right away. The next day, I packed my things, left John and Cindy's house, and contacted a real estate agent. I said, "I want to let go of that house." After a week, John, apparently having trouble with the real estate agent who came for the appraisal, called me furiously. I visited their house and quietly said, "I've decided to end our relationship here. That's why I'm selling this house. It's essential to discard unnecessary things when cleaning, after all." John and Cindy looked puzzled. "This is Dad's house, right? It all became mine through inheritance." John argued. Cindy, in a fit of anger, said, "Exactly. This is my husband's property. What are you doing on your own?" Sighing, I asked, "You inherited it, but do you remember changing the house's title?" John replied, "I don't remember, but I thought it automatically became mine." "That's not the case. This house is in my name," I explained, and they looked shocked. "What do you mean?" They asked. That's what I mean. Also, this marks the end of the financial aid to your company, I declared. Financial aid? Was I getting loans from you, Mom? John was astonished. I knew about John's forgetfulness, but I didn't expect it to be this severe. Have you forgotten? We deposited funds into your account every month for your business. We had a contract for that, I explained. John turned pale. I thought that money was earned by Cindy, he said, looking dumbfounded. Cindy also looked shocked, confronting John. You thought that money was earned by me? I thought it was yours. Initially, when John was struggling for funds in his early marriage, I decided to invest in his business for the sake of my grandchildren. To avoid it being seen as inheritance, I set up a personal asset management company for the investment. I had explained this clearly to John, but it seemed he mistook it for Cindy's income. Our company's name coincidentally resembled that of Cindy's beauty salon, causing the confusion. Suddenly, John asked, "Wait a minute. You mean the investments continued even after Dad passed away? Isn't that Dad's company?" "I am the president of that company," I said. He looked at me as if he couldn't believe it. Cindy, too, was agape with astonishment. For the sake of your father's honor, I kept silent, but actually, that asset was mine. My parents were wealthy, I revealed calmly. We had married against my parents' wishes, almost like eloping. John had never met my grandparents, but as time passed, we reconciled. When they passed away, I inherited their assets. This was a distinct property, not part of the communal assets with my husband, but my personal property. Wait, so Dad didn't own it? John asked, stunned. Right, as I've said multiple times, Dad didn't leave much inheritance. I explained. It might have been natural for John and Cindy to assume it was his dad's inheritance from a general perspective. However, their belief that they received the inheritance without any formalities showed a lack of thought on John's part as a son. Originally, John started his own business because he was fired from every company he worked at. "Nobody understands my talent," he would rant. We were puzzled about how to support him. Not wanting him to squander the inheritance on frivolities, we provided him with capital and loans. John, misunderstanding it as Cindy's income, had exhausted it on living expenses and business funds. Cindy's beauty salon wasn't doing well either, and her income was minimal. Yet, she seemed to be relying on John's supposed income. I thought I would inherit this house. I just followed Dad's instructions. John expressed his anger. Wait, this house isn't in your name? I thought it was already bought because it was renovated. Cindy was furious. Disappointed by their attitudes, I said, from now on, manage your affairs by yourselves, and prepared to leave. At that moment, Cindy grabbed my shoulder tightly and said with a mix of anger and anxiety, "Wait a minute. Don't you care about your cute grandchildren? What about us? Using grandchildren as a threat? How low can you go?" I firmly said, "You can't choose your parents. Maybe there were problems with the way I raised you, but I'm done coddling. That's best for the grandchildren too," and I left the scene. Behind me, I could hear John and Cindy raising their voices. John said, "It's your fault." And Cindy retorted, "What are you talking about? You're to blame too." Eventually, the house was sold and John's business failed due to a lack of funds, leading to their divorce. They gave up custody, and I ended up taking care of the grandchildren. John and Cindy then became incommunicado, and I have no idea where they are or what they're doing now. Under my guidance, the grandchildren learned valuable household skills. The eldest learned to cook, the middle child mastered cleaning, and the youngest got good at organizing. They are learning the importance of handling their affairs themselves. Now, they collaborate and complete the housework without my intervention. They will live their lives, learning from their parents' failures. I am happy that I could teach my grandchildren important values. Balancing their studies and housework, they also take care of me, and we are living peaceful days now. I am Courtney. I have a husband named John, who is 2 years younger than me. His carelessness often troubles me. Our relationship began when I was 27 years old and met John at a matchmaking party. At that time, we were both seeking a life partner. My previous boyfriends had been indifferent to marriage or were financially struggling, but John was different. While we were dating, he would carry my bags and often treat me to meals, always being kind. However, I later realized that he had been doing the same things for his sister, Wendy, so his actions with women had become habitual. After we got married, John's attitude remained the same, but his priorities changed. It became more apparent than when we were dating. I had thought he was especially kind only to me. John's family includes his mother and his sister. His father is still alive, but several years ago, after a fierce dispute between his parents, they got divorced, leaving his mother living alone at home. Consequently, his mother frequently visits our apartment. I'm struggling financially. Your father has abandoned me, and I don't know what to do. Please, John, come back home. How can I manage alone, dear? She pleaded with tears in her eyes. Moved by her tearful appeal, John repeatedly suggested to me, "What do you think about us living with my mom at her family home?" Indeed, his mother is unemployed and has no income. She might have received some property settlement at the time of the divorce, but she struggles with living and house maintenance expenses. Previously, there was no concern when John lived with his mother, but since our marriage and his moving out, she has been alone. John pleaded with me almost daily, saying, "There's plenty of room at my parents' house, and I don't intend to burden you with household chores. Won't you consider living together?" Moreover, he tearfully appealed to me, "Courtney, please think of helping this frail old woman." I was surprised to hear him describe her as frail. Realizing how difficult their living situation was, I became concerned about my mother-in-law. Thus, I reluctantly decided to live with her. When I agreed, John and his mother hugged each other happily. While I thought living together might not be bad if it made them happy, deep down, I wished to enjoy newlywed life just with John. Thus, despite being newlyweds, we started living in his mother's house. Both John and I work, but honestly, John wasn't particularly skilled at his job. His goal was to master his favorite burger and open his own burger shop. He was apprenticing at a burger shop while working. I admired his pursuit of this dream, but it seemed to have reduced his time for family. In the first month, his mother thanked us for living together. However, as we got busy with work, she started considering the house her territory during the day and began treating me rudely. "Hey, Courtney, please don't put plastic bottles in that trash can. How have you been living all this time? I can't believe you can't even sort garbage. What exactly did your parents teach you?" My mother-in-law scolded me. I just replied, "I'm sorry," at that time. I am not ignorant. Despite her insistence on proper sorting, I didn't know which trash bin at her house was for what kind of waste. When we moved into my in-laws' house, a fair amount of garbage came out while unpacking. I tried to sort them accordingly. When I asked my mother-in-law how to sort the waste, she said, "Don't worry about it. I'll sort it out later." Yet, she complains every time I dispose of a plastic bottle but says nothing when John does the same. I do sort the garbage on collection days. I began to feel this was more than just nagging. Furthermore, she demanded I do more housework, even though it's impossible for me to prepare lunch while working. I firmly told my mother-in-law it's impossible. Then she insisted, "Don't say impossible. As a daughter-in-law, you should comply with my requests." This attitude surprised and disappointed me. Who was it that tearfully begged us to live together? Coming here was likely a bad deal. Probably, her real intention was to secure financial support from her son. An unwanted daughter-in-law was just an obstacle. While I was struggling with my relationship with my mother-in-law, I received news from my company about starting remote work. It was deemed less stressful and more efficient than commuting. However, this remote work was optional, not mandatory for all employees. It seemed like the company was gathering some examples to consider a full-scale implementation. I started working from home, thinking it would enable me to prepare lunch, as my mother-in-law had repeatedly requested. But even after preparing meals and managing housework, her attitude didn't improve. Instead, she began to express her dissatisfaction about my presence at home, saying, "If only my daughter-in-law weren't here, the atmosphere of the house wouldn't have turned so bad. I'm really fed up with this." Her words hurt me. Doing housework here felt like a greater burden than normal. Particularly, John is sloppy, not sorting garbage or taking care of his laundry. It's always me who has to gather his laundry from his room. Yet, he takes this for granted and often complains. "Why can't I find my favorite socks? They're just hung out to dry." "What? I plan to wear them today." "You're too late with the laundry. You should try harder at housework." He calmly expressed his dissatisfaction like this. I don't understand why I am being blamed when the real problem is John not doing his laundry. His words were shocking. Furthermore, his mother, agreeing with John, also criticized me. "That's right. Courtney is always at home, so why can't she manage the household chores properly?" she rebuked. It felt like they were mocking me. I was astounded by how they thought our current living standard was maintained. In addition to this, unbelievable words came from my mother-in-law and John. Now that Wendy is coming back, having such an inept daughter-in-law will be embarrassing. I can't imagine what she'll think. Certainly, Wendy has become quite responsible. If she finds out how clumsy my wife is, she'll probably mock me. I hadn't been informed about Wendy's return. I only found out through their conversation. Wendy is John's biological sister and my sister-in-law. She got married 2 years ago and currently lives with her husband. I haven't talked much with Wendy, but from the attitudes of my mother-in-law and John, I felt like she also looks down on me. I was disappointed, wondering if there's anyone reasonable in this house. On the day of Wendy's arrival, my mother-in-law was excited. Wendy came in with her suitcase, sat down on the living room sofa, and said, "There's nothing like being at home." I offered her some drink, but surprisingly, she asked, "Who is this person?" As if she didn't know me despite attending my wedding with John. I should have told her I was John's wife, but my mother-in-law spoke before I could. "Listen, Wendy, this is John's wife. She can't handle household chores properly, always has a tense expression, and never does anything right. She used to work, but now she just stays at home," my mother-in-law said in front of me. I was shocked. I haven't quit my job. I switched to remote work, considering our family situation. Despite explaining this to John and my mother-in-law beforehand, it seemed she hadn't listened at all. Wendy seemed to believe her mother's story. "What? An unemployed person in the house? Why would you keep such a person? She's the type who won't understand until she experiences hardship." She said that while laughing mockingly. My mother-in-law agreed, indeed. Then she turned to me. "Listen, Courtney, you should know Wendy is pregnant and wants to give birth at home." I was taken aback, as this was news to me. I wasn't informed about her return or her pregnancy. It seemed they had discussed it already, but I was completely out of the loop. Even though there is a spare room, the arrival of a pregnant woman in the house will surely add to the financial burden. Yet, nobody had informed me about this in advance. This situation itself was surprising, but what my mother-in-law said next was even more shocking. "Wendy is coming back for her pregnancy, so jobless like you should get out. We don't need someone without an income in this house. Get out before Wendy comes back with her things. If you don't pack up, I'll throw away all your belongings," she declared. Stunned, I had to ask, "Are you serious?" Honestly, I felt relieved at the thought of leaving. It's much better to live on my own terms than to be mistreated by this family. The ones who will be troubled by my absence should be my mother-in-law, John, and the returning Wendy. Yet, as if not understanding her own situation, my mother-in-law said, "We'll have no problem without you. Then, I shall leave this house." I was fed up with being looked down upon by my mother-in-law and Wendy and John's concurrence. John, who was always ladies first in front of his sister and mother, showed indifference to me, always prioritizing them. Maybe during our dates, he was attentive to me just because he used to prioritize his sister and mother back home. But since we started living with his mother, all his kindness was directed towards her, and I received none. Perhaps I was just a supporter for him to realize his dreams. good only for providing money. I immediately contacted a certain person. To that person, I first said, I'm breaking up with John, so please collect the rent from him or his mother from now on. When they asked why, I explained that I was ordered to leave the house because Wendy was coming back for childbirth. They responded with an apology. I'm really sorry, and assured, leave the future arrangements to me. Afterward, I stayed in a hotel for a while, searching for a place to live alone. During this time, I received frantic calls from John. What do you mean by divorcing? And what's this about repayment? I thought we were doing well. Doing well? You kick out your wife for your sister, and you ask what's wrong? I retorted. Kicked out? What are you talking about? Didn't you decide to leave yourself so Wendy wouldn't be stressed during her stay? John said, it seemed like my mother-in-law and Wendy had convinced him that I left on my own accord. However, the truth was different. I left because I was told I'd be thrown out with all my belongings if I didn't. I had to escape with my stuff, fearing what might happen if I stayed, I explained. I had thought John would never know the truth about me being expelled by his mother and sister, but to think he actually believed I left on my own accord, that shocked me. By the way, did your father come to the house? Huh? Yeah, he did. I didn't quite get it. He mentioned something about rent, but we own the house, so there's no rent to pay. At that moment, I couldn't help but exclaim loudly, what? Did you forget the explanation when we moved in? When your parents got divorced, the house was in your father's name. But your mother refused to leave. In the end, it was rented out for $2,000 a month. Really? He was surprised. Yes, your mother was supposed to pay the rent monthly as part of the property division. But when she couldn't pay, we were asked to live together and pay the rent. But I've never paid any rent. He said. That made sense. John's income was low because he spent a lot of time training at the burger shop. Thus, I had been covering the $2,000 rent. I used to give it directly to his mother, who then made the payment from her bank account. I had informed them about this at the beginning of our cohabitation. I was appalled that his mother had forgotten that I was paying the rent. It's clear I've been paying $2,000 every month. But now that we're separating, I won't pay for that house anymore. What? John sounded shocked. That's why I informed your father. Since I won't be paying anymore, your mother should get the money from you. He came to talk about this today. Hearing this, John was flustered, but I couldn't understand why he was so perturbed. John, who was so absorbed in his training and considerate towards his mother, leaving me without kindness, now acted like a victim. I realized once again what a terrible family they were. Anyway, your father should have received the divorce papers I filled out. Make sure you pay up. Wait, what is this promissory note about? John asked. I sighed. Why does he so easily forget important things? That promissory note is something you suggested, remember? You said, I'll work hard to pursue my dream. So, I'll leave the household finances to you. I'll calculate and repay all the excess payments later. That's why I made the promissory note. Oh, did I say that? John said that in a small, uncertain voice. Has he finally remembered? He seemed to have forgotten what he once promised. I'm moving forward with the divorce. I can't afford to wait for your dream to come true. If we hadn't lived together, you wouldn't have gone so overboard. Paying $2,000 in rent plus the living expenses for 3 people every month was an unnecessary expense. The rent and living expenses of our previous apartment weren't that high, but living in John's family home had driven up costs. Therefore, the amount John owed me kept increasing. Please, don't divorce me. I have no one but you. He pleaded. What? I don't need a husband like you. Someone who doesn't pay, neglects housework, doesn't cherish his wife, and disregards family. I don't need such a husband. If you don't want to submit the divorce papers, shall we discuss it through a lawyer? I said and hung up the phone. Later, John apparently lashed out at his mother and Winnie for the first time. Why did you do something to drive Courtney out? Because of you, I can't pursue my dream and am now buried in debt. He yelled. His mother and Wendy were scolded by John for the first time, with Wendy in tears and his mother in shock. Despite this situation, John's father firmly declared, "If you can't make the financial payments, leave this house by the end of the month." He threatened to call the police if they were still there next month, leaving them scrambling to pack. Wendy's husband came to pick her up, learning everything from his father-in-law and reprimanding her for her shameful behavior. Meanwhile, John and his mother were forced to live in a shabby apartment. Their current living situation is drastically different from before, and both are struggling. John has quit his apprenticeship at the burger shop to work hard and earn money, taking on 2 part-time jobs to make the payments to me. His mother, told by John to earn the living expenses, is working multiple part-time jobs to cover the rent and living expenses for the 2 of them. It seems they are having a hard time now after living an easy life before. I feel they finally get their just desserts. The thought of being free from their exploitation makes me feel like my life is brightening up. Determined to reclaim the time I lost, I've decided to pursue my happiness from now on. How much do you want? We're willing to pay, so let's settle this. The reason I panicked was because the moment I entered the hospital room, she said words I'd never expected. Wait, what? Mia, are you serious about what you just said? Yes, I am. Explain yourself. They treated us so terribly, it almost led to a major tragedy. It was clear they were mocking us. After doing something so terrible, they want to settle with money? I can't accept a settlement. Mia, take responsibility properly. That's unbelievable. You're as stubborn as ever. You don't know what might happen if you make us angry. Don't push it. Suppressing my anger, I continued to argue with this brazen and shameless couple. I think we've heard enough. My husband intervened in the argument. I had never seen such a frightening expression on my husband's face before. Mia, you've always believed that money can solve everything since high school. You haven't changed. Everyone wants money, right? Am I wrong? That's right. As long as you have money, you can solve anything. Even this woman will shut up if you give her money. Facing the couple, my husband said, "If that's the case, let's see if we can really settle this with money." Mia and her husband were overwhelmed by my husband's suggestion, but in the end, they left the hospital room with some provoking words. As Mia said, maybe everyone does want money. Money brings us happiness and joy like magic. It's the only thing with such magical power in this world. But, as my husband said, there are things money can't solve or buy. Along with their attempt to almost kill me and my baby, they would soon understand this whether they like it or not. I am Susan Johnson. I'm 32 years old and 9 months pregnant. My husband, Kevin, also 32, eagerly awaits the birth of our child. To celebrate this momentous occasion, we wanted to share our joy quietly, but it wasn't going to be easy. Because there was someone who didn't like the fact that we were going to have a child. That person was none other than Mia, a high school acquaintance and a fellow mother, who always managed to meddle in my life. Mia, who was a senior to both me and my husband during high school, came from a wealthy family that owned a big company. She was beautiful, excelled academically and athletically, and was like the idol of our school. But being pampered by her parents from a young age made her extremely selfish. She misunderstood that she could get anything with money, and so she had a bad reputation. Despite this, she was interested in Kevin and used both force and money to try to make him her boyfriend. However, Kevin was not interested in her and always cared for me. So I became his girlfriend instead of Mia. She didn't like Kevin choosing me, and from then on, she saw me as a rival. You and Kevin don't match. Break up with him now. But, Mia, that's too much. Kevin, you know I'm more beautiful than Susan, and I have money. Please stop, Mia. Don't say things like that. We were tormented by Mia's harsh words and money throughout high school. I consulted with teachers multiple times, but even they couldn't stand up to Mia's financial power, and the situation remained unresolved. After Mia graduated, we avoided her as much as possible, not wanting to provoke her. We lost contact with her for a while. Several years later, Mia unexpectedly reappeared in our lives and confronted us. Oh, Susan and Kevin. I haven't seen you in a while, but it looks like you've built a decent life despite being poor. Mia had also gotten married and had kids. Her family flaunted luxury brands and drove expensive cars. She continued her high school ways, using her wealth to control her fellow mothers, even possibly giving them money as allowance. Many of them declined, but they were tempted by the money and ended up accepting it. In exchange for the money, they had to do whatever Mia asked. Then Mia, using the mom friend she had paid off, began to harass us. Susan, your fashion sense has always been lacking, hasn't it? Has Kevin never really bought you any decent clothes since the old days? Can you stop parading on the main street like you own it? You should walk down the side streets. This isn't a place for people like you. Here, take some money and have lunch at some family restaurant or diner. Mia would criticize our appearance and actions like this, flaunt her money, and continue to harass us just like in high school. The more you react to people like that, the more they want to annoy you. So, just ignore her and she'll probably stop someday. I initially wanted to argue with my husband's advice, but soon accepted his words. Indeed, as my husband said, it was evident that people like Mia escalated their harassment when they got a reaction. Together with my husband, we dealt with Mia's provocations with minimal interaction and ensured that her words didn't affect us. One day, I found out I was pregnant, the moment I shared the news with my husband. He was overjoyed, ready to take on his role as a father with pride and do his best for our child. Inspired by my husband's determination, I also mustered the courage to live proudly as a mother and as a person. I hoped for peaceful days without Mia's harassment. But reality was not so kind. One day, 9 months into my pregnancy, I encountered Mia while returning from shopping with my visibly swollen belly. "Oh, Susan, you've gotten so fat since the last time I saw you. What have you been eating to look so embarrassing?" "Huh? This isn't because I've gained weight. I'm pregnant. It's natural. If you have no business with me, could you please be quiet?" Apparently angered by my response, Mia stood in my way. "You might have a bigger belly now, but it seems your attitude has grown too. How dare someone poor and plain like you get pregnant? You're really pushing my buttons. I don't care what you think, Mia. I just want to have my child in peace." I tried to defuse the situation, but it only angered Mia further. "Excuse me, Susan? Is that how you speak to me?" As I tried to walk away, Mia chased after me, attempting to grab my arm. In the ensuing commotion, her right arm struck my belly hard. The impact made me fall, and a sharp pain radiated from my abdomen. In agony, I hurriedly took out my phone from my bag and called my husband, barely managing to say, "The baby. What should I do?" before I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I realized I was in a hospital bed. Feeling warm under an electric blanket with N4 drip in my arm, I heard familiar voices nearby. As I turned, I saw my close friends, Olivia and Emma, sitting beside me. "Why are you here?" "Oh, is my baby okay?" "Don't move, Susan. You need to rest." I tried to sit up but was stopped by the sharp pain in my belly. Olivia and Emma tried to help me lay down, and that's when I noticed my belly had shrunk. A nurse informed me that I had gone into premature labor shortly after losing consciousness, and they had performed an emergency C-section. The baby was in an incubator due to being premature but was thankfully healthy. My husband, sensing the urgency of my call, had rushed over. He'd been informed of what had transpired by Olivia, Emma, and the attending doctor, and was livid. At that time, following Olivia and Emma's advice to get plenty of rest, I decided to focus on my recovery so I could see the baby as soon as possible. However, the next day, an unexpected pair visited my hospital room. Mia and her husband, Matt. "Mia, how audacious of you. Just to be sure, why are you here?" Olivia and Emma stared sternly at the couple. However, the two of them approached my bed as if they didn't even see them. How audacious of them to just barge into my room without knocking, especially after what they did to me. I felt so disgusted that I couldn't help but twist my face in repulsion. Then the rude couple suddenly threw out an unbelievable proposition. We'll be straightforward. How much do you want? Excuse me? How much do you want? I'm offering to pay, so let's settle this. The moment they stepped into the room and uttered those unexpected words, I panicked. Wait, what? Mia, are you serious about what you just said? Yes, I am. Explain yourself. They had been so close to causing a major tragedy, and their terrible treatment of us was evident. To suggest settling all of this with money after all they did was unthinkable. I can't accept a settlement. Mia, take responsibility properly. But instead of listening, Mia and Matt just kept hurling insults. That's unbelievable. You're as stubborn as ever. You don't know what might happen if you make us angry. Don't push it. It's not about being stubborn. You should stop making ridiculous claims and looking down on us. Yeah, Mia. Have you forgotten what you did to Susan? One misstep and it could have been a much bigger problem. Susan's baby was really in her belly, and you put them in danger without thinking. And now you're offering money as if that makes everything okay? Shouldn't you be grateful? Just take the settlement before you make us even angrier. Know your place. It's like you weren't taught anything by your parents. Olivia and Emma, in agreement with me, rebuked Mia and Matt, who just grew more infuriated and let loose on not just me, but also on them. As everyone forgot they were in a hospital and argued, the door of the room slowly opened with a creak. I understand what you're trying to say, but there's no way we're going to resolve this with money. My husband spoke with a quiet but firm voice. Olivia and Emma looked at him in surprise. Mia and Matt hadn't expected him, and his unprecedented fury made them shrink back. Seeing this side of my husband was new to me, Olivia, and Emma. We were rendered speechless by his anger. My husband went up to Mia and Matt and said with a powerful tone, Mia, you've always believed that money can solve everything since high school. You haven't changed. Everyone wants money, right? Am I wrong? Well, everyone desires money. There are things it can't buy or problems it can't solve. This incident is indeed a prime example. And no matter how much money was offered, I couldn't accept it. Both my daughter in the incubator and I are fortunately healthy and alive, but we might have been sent to the afterlife, despite it being such a grave incident. Mia seemed to have no remorse or understanding at all. The same goes for Matt, who was sitting next to her. They probably just have that kind of mindset. Thinking this way, my anger towards them grew, and I didn't want them to suggest so casually that this matter could be resolved with money. I feel the same way as Kevin. If money could resolve everything, there would be no need to involve the police or lawyers. Let me make this clear once again. You both should take responsibility. What's with you? You're more stubborn than usual today, aren't you? Aren't you all happy if you receive money? That's right. Anything can be resolved as long as you have money. You should keep quiet if you're given some. You should know your place. Weren't you taught anything by your parents? At this point, seeing Mia and Matt rudely cursing and acting as if money was the solution to all problems, I didn't even have the energy to get angry anymore. But then, my husband, pointing at Mia and Matt, said strongly, if you believe money can settle this, why don't we put that to a test? Huh? What do you mean? What? Mia and Matt were taken aback by my husband's insinuation, and I was equally puzzled. Yet, with mocking expressions, Mia and Matt confronted my husband. Are you out of your mind? What are you trying to do? Poor people like you and Susan can't do anything. Mia spat out those words and left the hospital room with Matt. Kevin, are you sure about what you said? I'll handle everything. Don't worry, my dear. There's nothing to be concerned about. After saying that, for some reason, Kevin made eye contacts with Olivia and Emma. As if Olivia and Emma understood, they both nodded and told me reassuringly, don't worry. I still didn't fully understand the situation, but the stress from the confrontation was taking a toll on my post-surgery body. I wanted to avoid any further confrontations or arguments. So, I decided to rely on my husband and focus on my recovery. The next evening, Mia stormed into the hospital, her face beet red with anger. Seeing her face, it was clear she was furious. "Hey, I know you're in there. Get up and come out right now, you cowardly, tacky woman. You set this whole thing up, didn't you? I can see right through it." Nurses outside the hospital room were arguing with her as she continued to shout, her voice filled with anger. At that moment, my husband, who was on his way back from work, saw Mia causing a scene outside the hospital and calmly said to her, "What are you thinking?" Bursting into the hospital and shouting like this, "Are you out of your mind?" Mia exploded with rage at him. "I know everything. Just because of a simple disagreement, you decided to involve the police and lawyers? Susan and you orchestrated all of this, didn't you? Just because? You say strange things. For a delusional woman like you, that's probably the most effective and fitting response. What? You're being inconsiderate to the other patients. Now leave. Make your excuses at the police station." At Kevin's words, Mia's anger intensified as she tried to approach my room. However, she was stopped by the security guards who were alerted by the commotion. Her voice grew fainter, presumably as she was escorted out of the hospital. I could hear sirens and Mia's shouts outside, suggesting Kevin had reported her and the police were taking her away. That night, I received a call from Matt. "I have a request. Please don't make this situation any bigger and don't involve me anymore. I'm divorcing her. I won't do anything else to you, please." He called out of nowhere, spouting incomprehensible things and acting selfishly. If the wife is as she is, the husband is as well. I'll hear the details later. Stop bothering me with your baseless, selfish claims. After I hung up on him, I immediately blocked his number and could finally settle into the peaceful rest that followed after. Later, I learned that Kevin had close friends, among them Olivia and Emma's husbands. Coincidentally, Olivia's husband was a police officer and Emma's husband was a journalist. After the incident with Mia and Matt at the hospital, Kevin had asked for their help. They gladly agreed. Olivia and Emma also offered their assistance as they were furious at Mia's actions. First, Kevin filed an assault and injury complaint against Mia, which, thanks to the help of Olivia's police connections, led to her arrest. During the subsequent interrogation by Emma, who was a lawyer, Mia desperately tried to defend herself. However, Olivia had recorded the conversation in the hospital and presented it as evidence. With the additional eyewitness accounts of Olivia and Emma, Mia was found guilty and was ordered to pay a hefty compensation. Thanks to Emma's husband, the whole affair was published in the newspaper. As a result, not only Mia but her family also suffered a significant blow. It was revealed that her parents had embezzled company funds to cover up their daughter's misdeeds, plunging their business into crisis. As for Matt, he was acting selfishly, leveraging Mia's financial power, which made everyone have a negative impression of him. And it seemed like rumors about him spread at work. Matt was met with cold stares from his colleagues, and there were whispers about him here and there, deteriorating his relationship with his co-workers. The situation worsened further as the rumor reached the HR department. The upper management of the company began to distrust Matt, and as a result, the HR department decided to transfer Matt to another branch. Naturally, Matt and Mia got divorced. Mia was disowned by her parents, and even her children were taken away from her. Struggling with the debt from the compensation and socially isolated due to the incident, she reportedly ended up living as a homeless person in a park. Olivia and Emma saw her receiving food at a soup kitchen. On the other hand, Matt, unable to handle the isolation and gossip at work, suddenly quit. Rumors said he left on a train, but his whereabouts remained unknown. Several months after the incident, I was discharged from the hospital, and both my child and I were in excellent health. We received substantial compensation from Mia. My daughter showed no after effects and has been growing healthily. With this incident, I deepened not only my bond with my husband, but also with my friends, including Olivia and Emma. Now, peaceful days have returned to us, and we are truly happy.